Welcome back, dearest viewers and subscribers. Thank you for sticking with me through my little night country phase. We're all out of the night country now. Now we're in the live action Airbender phase. Netflix has created something of an atrocity with the live action Avatar: The Last Airbender. I've only watched 2 episodes. I'm going to be reviewing this. I'm not exactly sure. Netflix shows are always a little difficult to review because they dump them all at once, which makes it hard to review them like episodically, like I like to do. So I'm going to try to do a couple at a time, or maybe just a couple at the beginning, and then once I've watched the whole thing, if I can make my way through it. And hopefully there are parts of this show that I actually enjoy and I don't just hate the whole thing. But as it stands, whoo boy. So I think, all right, so last night I sat down with my kids, who we all watched the show together, but it's been a while. But it's a part of our nostalgic family experience. And, we love the show. We also watched Korra, and I'm one of those guys that, I didn't like it as much, but I didn't hate it as much either. We'll get into Korra another time. But live action, The Last Airbender is just one of the most wonderful animated series ever made. It's just so full of, it's such a joyful, delightful experience. The characters are rich and funny, and they have such great relationships and dynamic character arcs. Obviously, some of the best character arcs, not just in animated television shows, I think, but in any show. And so it's a piece of work I love. A lot of times I review things that I haven't even, like I reviewed The Walking Dead, and I'd never read the comic books. So I didn't go into that with this expectation. I went into that blind. This I go into with an expectation, but also after just a few minutes of watching the first episode, my kids were like, "Hey Dad, can we just watch the original?" And I said, "Sure, yeah. I mean, it's been a while. Let's watch the original." So we turned on the first few episodes of the original animated Nickelodeon masterpiece. And of course it was, they're wonderful. The beginning of that show is so great. The only thing that I think that's better than the beginning of that show is how good it gets later on, right? But it's such a great introduction to all these characters. And then when we were done watching those episodes, they went off to do their own thing like they do because they're teenagers now. And I watched the live action. My son started it with me, but quickly grew bored and went to go play, I think, Skate 3 on his computer. My daughter watched about a scene of it with me later, and then we flipped on Game of Thrones because we're watching that, so I can teach her what real heartache feels like. Anyways, we watched the season 4 finale of Game of Thrones, and I'm reminded by just what an extraordinary season that was. Just perfect in almost every way. But anyways, I digress. Then I went back to Avatar. So, wow, watching them, maybe that was unfair, but I don't think so. Watching them back to back like that, it hurt my heart. So I'll just go through a few things. When Katara and Sokka are fishing, we get a really good example of how their personalities just instantly through some dialogue and conflict, right? They're fishing. She catches a fish with her airbending because she's actually right off, in the beginning of the show, she is a talented, or not airbending, sorry, waterbending. She's a talented waterbender, but she has no one to train her, so she can't take that talent and expand on it, right? But she's able to catch a fish, and then Sokka hits it with his spear, and then they argue, and you get this, this boys are better. Sokka's sexism, and I talked about this in another video, or before the show came out. His sexism is very mild, and I think that one of the important things that this show does with his character is sort of show that you can have these kinds of, shitty beliefs, like boys are better at hunting and girls are better at sewing. And then you can change and learn, right? And that's how things were written back in the day, in the before times, before we had to show that people are either just good or bad. They've made Sokka, and I'll get to him more in a minute. They've made Sokka in the live action not sexist, and it makes his character a lot less interesting and gives him a lot less room to grow. And they haven't really replaced that with other ways to grow. So Sokka has just been sort of robbed of that part of his arc. And the important thing about that part, that approach to storytelling, is that it helps us as viewers sort of learn how change happens and why that's a good thing, right? We don't watch Sokka and think, oh, Sokka, he's right. Boys rule, girls drool. No, that's his kind of immaturity, right? It's not that he's a total misogynistic asshole. He's just an immature boy who's trying to live up to being a man when all the men have left. It's also fundamental to his character, right? Meanwhile, Katara gets mad at him for this stuff. And she gets so mad at him during this opening segment, calling him a sexist, calling all this, that her power that you now witness has quite a lot of innate power there. She gets so full of rage that she cracks the iceberg behind her, and out of it comes the ice orb that Aang, the last Airbender, is inside. And so this great scene of sibling conflict and the different personalities, showing that Sokka is, full of himself, obviously insecure, that Katara is very strong-willed, very, willing to speak her mind, and that she's got an angry side. All of that shown in one scene develops those characters right away. You know exactly who they are. But then, of course, they both are, throughout the show, they both are able to grow from those places. And it's a great way to introduce Aang, this mysterious boy inside this orb. Who is he? When they get him out, they are surprised to see he's an airbender, because nobody has seen an airbender or an air nomad or whatever for, generations, 100 years. And then we get Appa. They leave Appa in the iceberg in the live action show. But in this one, they get Appa and he can't fly yet. And so they paddle back to the village. At the village, you have Gran, who is a kind of grouchy lady in the cartoon, but in the live action, for whatever reason, is just horrible. I mean, the performance isn't great. The direction isn't great. She actually ends up reading the famous introduction lines as dialogue. So, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. All that is in her little speech to the village and to Aang. And then she just basically is all your people are dead. It's a really awkward scene, and maybe the worst single scene so far in the show. Just everything about Gran is a real miss, and it's kind of that's kind of where you start to see, okay, they're missing on a lot of these characters. You also see early on that Katara has none of the spunk that makes her character so captivating in the original. She's very. It's weird how they're doing her so dirty. I thought we were supposed to make, I thought the whole point these days was to make really strong female characters, but it seems to me that they have done the opposite of that so far. Katara was a very strong female character in the original, and here she's just sort of sad, and she can't really waterbend, but then in one scene, she's able to block Zuko's fireball with her sudden surge of power, right? And she's like, wow, look what I did. And it's she's just, I don't know, maybe this changes as the season goes on, but in the first 2 episodes, she has none of that sort of toughness or impatience. She's kind of she's an actual boss girl in the original. She's funny. She stands her ground. She gets annoyed when the boys are annoying, and she tells them how she feels. she's very likable still while she does all of this, but in the show she just feels kind of bland, like she's had her personality just sucked out of her. It's so strange what they've done to Katara. Another character that I feel like they've really done dirty is Iroh. He looks like Uncle Iroh from the cartoon, but Uncle Iroh in the cartoon is this sort of obviously very wise, but very patient and he's not this like old guy who just gives a bunch of like a mountain of advice. He's often making sly jokes, or there's a scene where in the original where Zuko and the commander fight, and Zuko wins, and then the commander's about to like get him from behind, dishonorably, and Iroh stops him because Iroh's a badass, and he says something along the lines of like, Zuko showed more honor and blah, blah, blah. He praises Zuko, right, to the commander. And then he says, and we'll be leaving now. Thank you for the tea. And then Zuko says to him, did you mean that? And Iroh says, yes, it was delicious tea. Right? That's the Iroh that we love. He doesn't just sort of like say, he's not always just saying things up front, saying them, explaining them, giving like good advice right up front. He's always just a little twisty in how he. Maybe I'm not describing it well, but if you've seen the show, you know what I mean. This is why Iroh's such a beloved character. When something big is about to happen, he's more concerned with are you going to finish this meal than he is with being part of this big monumental thing. I mean, he cares about all this stuff. He's letting his nephew figure things out, offering a little bit of advice, and I don't know. Iroh's a great character. He's one of the best characters in the whole show, and he just doesn't feel at all like Iroh in the live action. He looks like him, just doesn't feel like him. Zuko's much, much, much closer. I would say Zuko's one of the better characters in the live action adaptation. Going so far as to sometimes even sound a little bit like the voice actor, Rufio. Sokka is actually, I think, is one of the better characters. I think it's a real mistake that they have taken his, sort of boyhood sexism out, because I think it robs him of a really great character arc, especially when he gets to meet Suki. But I think the actor does a great job capturing his mannerisms and his expressions and behavior, and he feels very, unlike Katara, who feels like a totally different character. Sokka feels very much like Sokka. Aang, I'm a little more mixed on. I think it's really tough to get a kid actor to do that role. It's such a big, important role, and I think they've written it so poorly. So I don't know yet. The kid seems fine, but the character, they start with the attack on the Airbender, the Air Temple, and it's kind of interesting to see the temple and to have all the Master Gatsu and stuff. Like, all that stuff is interesting. But then you have Aang leave, and he sits there talking to Appa, and it's just an exposition dump about his feelings. Like, all this crap just blah, spewed out. I couldn't believe what I was watching, honestly. I was like, why are we getting all this now? Like, this is stuff that we're supposed to be sort of, like, all of this, including the attack on the Air Temple, is all stuff we're supposed to learn along with the characters as they discover what's happened. And instead, it all is just, like, thrown at us right at the beginning. And so often throughout this show, there are moments where the dialogue is just this wooden, dull, expository garbage. Whereas in the cartoon, it's often funny and witty. I forgot to mention this earlier. For instance, when Aang is found in the cartoon, Katara is the first one to speak with him, which is very, very fitting for obvious reasons. He opens his eyes and sees her, and he says, "Can I tell you something?" And she says, "What?" And he says, "Come closer." So she does, expecting some big serious thing, which is what the show is always throwing at us. The new show, the live action show. But in the cartoon, he says, will you take me penguin sledding? And I mean, that's the difference right there between the cartoon and the live action adaptation. The live action adaptation starts with somebody being burned to a crisp, which is a fine way to start a show, but not Avatar: The Last Airbender, penguin sledding. And it's the same thing as the show goes on, right? When they go to the next island, Kyoshi, why do they go there in the cartoon? To go ride elephant koi. That's what like Aang is not concerned completely entirely with like saving the world right off the bat. I mean, that is something that's in his mind, but he's avoiding it. Like his character in the original show had run away from being the Avatar. That's a huge part of his arc. In this one, he actually just goes on a little joyride. He's going to come back. Totally changes his whole, like, fundamental character arc. But anyways, he wants to go ride these elephant koi. They show up to this island. They ride the elephant koi. Or he rides them. And then there's, like, the Unagi monster. I can never get the names right. So when they show up there, the reason for them being there is this. It's just a fun little side adventure, and that fun little side adventure part of the show is just gone. And people are I've seen a lot of positive comments about the show, and I just feel like a lot of them are like, I'm missing what they're enjoying about it, because for me the enjoyment of this show isn't the story of the war between the four nations. The war is a backdrop, right? This live action show wants it to be, Game of Thrones. It wants it to be this epic war. That's why it starts with war and battle. But the original starts with penguin sledding and elephant koi riding, and yeah, some of the same things happen. They show up, and Suki and her badass women fighters ambush them, and in the original, Sokka is so disheartened by being beaten by a girl that he won't eat. And they've really established his character as someone who is constantly hungry, which I can really relate to. But in the show, he's at the table with them eating, and he's not bummed out about being beaten by girls. And he just, he wants to show off a little to Suki, but it's more like in a flirty way, and they get all lovey-dovey, romancy in this. And it mostly just shows how Suki makes Sokka like a better, more confident person. She's like, she tells him at one point, "Thank you for bringing the world to me." What? They brought the Fire Nation to you. Like, he comes from a tiny little village in the middle of nowhere. You're a badass warrior at a much more important village with a statue of a past Avatar. Like, it makes no sense. It also, they have in this version, Aang goes to talk to this Kyoshi past Avatar lady, and there's a line, I'm trying to remember it, but she's explaining like what he needs to do, and he's like, "Wait, I need to learn the other elements to become more powerful." I'm like, who wrote this line of dialogue? This kid is surprised that he needs to become more powerful to stop the war. Like, that doesn't, of course, is he an idiot? Did he bonk his head while he was flying around? Which, by the way, he can just do now. He can just fly around now without his little glider. They show him in the air temple in the beginning just flying around like Peter frickin' Pan. That is not something airbenders can do, even the Avatar. He's not able to just fly right off the bat. Like, there's a lot more. There's a lot more that I really didn't like about these first two episodes. But mostly, if I just distill it down, it's that they've misunderstood most of the characters. Some of them badly, like Iroh and Katara. Some of them are doing their best, like Zuko and Sokka. Some of them I'm just not sure of, like Aang. But overall, it's really the joy is gone. In the Disney live action adaptations, often the color is also gone. They've taken the joy and the color. At least this one still remains very colorful. And I'm not gonna get too hard on the CGI and the costumes. I don't think it's great. I think CGI is really mixed. Like sometimes it feels way too green screeny. Other times I'm like, that's pretty cool bending. That looks pretty neat. The costumes all look pretty bad, like cosplaying. Basically, the acting is pretty mid from a lot of the actors. Sort of all feels like a CGI drenched high school stage production. But I could live with that. Like I could live with the not great production. Like I could live with a lot less special effects. I could live with cheap costumes. You can actually do a lot with cinematography to make and lighting and stuff to make cheap costumes look pretty damn good. But when you sort of throw it all out there and it's also bright and every mistake, you kind of see every mistake, right? What I think the real problem is that it fundamentally misunderstands the nature, tone, and point of the original series, which is one that requires dynamic character arcs, that requires a lot more fun and lightheartedness, which isn't to say that it doesn't get very dark or that these characters don't have moments of doubt and emotion. I mean, there are a lot of those, even in the first few episodes, right? But a lot of them take place, between the core characters. And instead here they've shifted it around to where we're getting exposition, speechy shit from Gran or whatever. And so a lot of these moments that are supposed to happen between the core team aren't happening. And, and like the Suki Sokka stuff, like Sokka comes in the cartoon and he's just so full of himself. He's just so like, oh, you girls, I can show you. And then they kick his butt. And because Sokka is actually a good person, and these sexist tendencies are really just insecurities, he comes back and he actually kneels before them and asks for forgiveness and asks Suki to train him. And she agrees, but she makes him wear one of their outfits. It looks like a dress. She's just making him feel better, telling him it's like, oh, this is a warrior's uniform. And then Aang pops his head in and says, hi, Sokka, nice dress, and walks out. It's like all that like little goofy fun humor, or like, Aang showing off for all the girls and getting on Katara's nerves and that whole thing. Like all these little moments might not seem important to people making a live action where they want it to be a big Game of Thrones battle, heavy, whatever. But those are important moments. All those moments are fundamental character development moments, and they're funny. And this is a funny show. This is a funny show that makes you feel. And I just, I know this will hopefully bring a wider audience to the cartoon. And I know a lot of people think cartoons are just for kids and that the live action stuff is for adults. And I'm sure this will be a big hit for Netflix. But I am heartened to say that the Rotten Tomatoes score from critics is much more along the lines of what it should be. I think it was 59% the last time I checked. Which means a lot of critics aren't lapping this up like they did with Night Country, at least. I'm surprised audiences seem to be liking it as much as they do. I don't know what's going on there, but from my perspective, this does not feel like Avatar. This feels like Frankenstein's monster version of Avatar. Too grim, too dark, tonally all over the place, wooden, expository dialogue, badly misunderstood characters, and just not fun. Not fun, and I have gone on long enough. I will check back in after, I don't know, a couple more episodes, we'll see. And let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Peace.